Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Quirk of Destiny by Catherine Greenall, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Green and Pleasant Land. It was a bright and sunny day in Baxendale as we walked through the fields past fluttering blue and pink meadow flowers. The bees were buzzing, and a light breeze was blowing in the trees, making a comforting rushing sound. The hills in the distance were hazy in the midday sun. We could see a herd of cows milling around in a green field, munching the sweet grass and making the odd, sudden, loud mooing noise that made us laugh. As we crossed the stream, the water trickled idly along, and the odd trickleback caused a flurry of bubbles as it came up for air. And yet, something way underneath the rural scene's surface was wrong. We didn't know how wrong until much later. Chapter 2, A Worrying Development. The door to Callum O'Connell's home office stood open, and through it a large dark oak desk was visible. His phone was ringing incessantly, but he wasn't answering it. He had obviously not gone far, as he had not taken his ever-present mobile phone, and he had left a half-full glass of wine on the desk next to an open bottle of Shiraz. The clues to his work were in the open journal, which contained an article about genetic engineering, and he had made several pages of handwritten notes punctuated by formula and spiraling diagrams. A discarded dark jacket lay carelessly over a chair, and a guitar had been taken out of its black case, which lay beside it on the floor. A music book was propped up next to it. At some point, Callum had obviously taken a break to strum his guitar. Reference books were strewn untidily around the floor, discarded as each had served their purpose. A damp towel lay on the floor in the corner of the room, dropped and left where it had fallen. Yesterday's newspaper was draped on the arm of the chair, the pages left uneven and creased, and opened at an article he had been reading. A door slammed somewhere in the house, and excited deep barks resounded in the hallway. A deep, melodic voice with an Irish lilt scolded, "Buster, get down from there!" More barking, then a tall man with floppy blonde hair ran up the stairs and into the office. Callum O'Connell was working long hours for his work at the Department for Food and Environment, DFE, these days, and at the end of a long week, he was feeling tired. His job involved helping to assess new foodstuffs and technologies in the authorization process for the food to be grown or sold in the United Kingdom and Europe. As he sank to the chair in front of the desk, picking up the journal and sipping his wine, the mobile phone began to ring again. "Hello, Callum O'Connell here. Where have you been? I've been trying to get you all evening." It was Rob Moore, a friend and colleague in the authorizations team at the DFE. "Guess what I heard today at work?" "Don't know, but I suppose you're going to tell me." There's a rumor that a genetically modified animal feed already in use in the UK is causing unpredictable side effects, and the whole thing has been covered up for over a year now." Jeremy's none too pleased. He feels he's been kept out of the loop. He thinks government ministers must have been involved in the cover-up. Jeremy Evans was the environment director at DFE and tended to be rather self-important. "You're joking," said Callum. I've just been reading in this month's Journal of Biotechnology that tests in Italy showed that GM DNA from animal feed was found in the milk that the animals produced. No one knows the effects of this on human health yet. Why is this being covered up? How come they have not withdrawn the product? "Well, as you know, in the UK and Europe, dairy products and eggs from animals fed with GM material do not have to be labeled," continued Rob. "At the department, we carry out a risk assessment of GM products on a case-by-case basis. This new product is a GM soya called G517. It had the usual evidence submitted to us by the manufacturer, Novagentech. It was authorized and has been in widespread use in the UK for almost 2 years." Callum had carried out extensive evidence gathering during his authorization work into GM products, including animal feed, and had come to his own conclusions about its safety. He was determined that he would not consume GM material and always bought organic products. He was also vegan, having been convinced about the inherent health and safety issues in the meat and dairy industry by the mad cow disease and foot and mouth scares in the UK. He was also a fervent believer in animal rights and knew that there was much cruelty and death involved in the farming of animals for food, even for supposedly vegetarian food. Jeremy says that the ministers for business, environment, and food seem to be involved, but he does not know how yet. There's going to be hell of a stink about this next week. Jeremy is fuming. Well, I think we should be armed in advance with all the research we can find on this. The ministers have to be made aware of the risks they are taking here and not immediately withdrawing this product, said Callum. It's not just human health. The environment and wildlife around the crop growing sites could be affected. Okay, I'll let Ben know too. Ben Turner was a genetic scientist and their colleague at DFE. All three had started work there around the same time and had become firm friends. They arranged to meet on Tuesday, the next time that Callum was due at the department office in London to compare notes. That would give them some time on Monday to gather whatever research they could find on GM animal feed and the impacts on health and the environment. Callum switched off the phone. He didn't want any more disturbances tonight. He just needed to get some rest. He went down to switch off the lights and check on Buster, who was now sleeping in his basket, exhausted after their long walk. He had adopted Buster from the local animal rescue shelter, and he was a crossbred between a border collie and German shepherd dog. What have they done, Buster? He said sadly as he patted the big floppy-haired dog. Buster whined softly. Chapter 3. 2 years ago, the trouble with rats. Anita Collins sighed as she put the food shopping into the boot at the same time as trying to keep the peace. Ow, Mom, tell her she just hit me. This was from Joanna, her youngest. She was 12, going on 15, to be honest. Teenage tantrums seemed to come along so early these days. Well, she's being a total pain. All she goes on about is, can I have a new dress, Mom? Can I have a new dress? Everyone else will be in the latest for the end of term party. Becky's having one, so can I have a new dress? For goodness sake, shut up about it. Rachel was the older sister, aged 15, and thought she knew everything. Was it really like that at 15? Thought Anita. She did not remember being so. Children respected their elders in those days. She would not have dared to stand up to her parents and teachers in the way that kids did these days. Oh, girls, you are giving me a headache. Can we all just shut up about the new dress now? This was James, her eldest. At 17, he was becoming more of an adult every day, and she knew he would soon be leaving home, probably for good. He would go to university next year and was already planning which ones to apply to. Shut up, the lot of you. I'm sick of your arguing. Get in the car. The next one to whine will get no cinema tonight. Anita knew that James probably would go off with his friends anyway, it being Saturday night, but the two girls still enjoyed their weekend trips to the cinema with their mom. In the temporary silence, Anita gratefully sank into the driving seat and headed for home. Her thoughts were about work. Her job was at Novagentech, a biotechnology corporation producing GM animal feed for the livestock industry. It was supposed to increase crop and milk yield, but even though these effects had not been observed in the tests they had carried out, the company was still marketing the product with these claims. Anita's work involved testing new products on animals. She had recently been working on a new product called G517, which was a GM soya product for animal feed. She had been running tests for a few months on rats and mice fed with the GM product. She first noticed a problem a week ago when 15 of the 30 rats being fed the GM soya died. Yesterday, she had arrived at the lab to find that another 10 test rats had died. She reported her concerns to her manager, Liza Dixon, immediately and was shocked at her offhand attitude to the almost total mortality of the GM test subjects. So what? It's only a few dead rats. The product is in production now and has passed all the toxicology tests in the U.S. As far as Anita was aware, the product still had to demonstrate safety in the UK, and test results had still to be reported to the UK Department for Food and Environment, together with the application for marketing the product in the UK. Anita could not understand her manager's attitude and sought advice from her senior manager, Tom Bridge. He was reassuring and said that, of course, the safety tests would duly be reported to the UK Department for Food and Environment as part of the application for a UK license. Later on, she was called into Liza Dixon's office. Liza's face was contorted in fury. In future, you do not go running to senior managers with your dodgy test results. Do you understand? She hissed through clenched teeth. Apparently, you contaminated the feeding units with sterilizing solution, and that was what killed your rats. But I couldn't have, began Anita, who had been running such tests for years and was always careful not to cross-contaminate equipment. I'm not taking any of your excuses this time. You can consider yourself on a verbal warning for your unprofessional carelessness, said Liza, virtually closing the door on her as Anita left, her cheeks burning and close to tears. She had never been spoken to like that by a manager and could not believe that her professional integrity was being called into question. Over the weekend, she had time to consider and still felt that she had not made a mistake with the sterilizing solution, but did not see how she could prove it. She planned to keep her head down for a few days when she went in next week and see what happened. But she would not be the subject of any further accusations. She would ensure she was extra careful in the test regime in future and was planning to ask a colleague to double-check any results before reporting them. Still, she wasn't looking forward to Monday morning at all. Monday morning came around far too quickly, and as Anita shooed the children out to school with their backpacks, bulging with books and packed lunches, she had a queasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. When she arrived at work, there was a note stuck to her computer screen requesting her to go and see Liza Dixon immediately. Her friend Peggy, who worked in the same team in the lab, looked up as she passed and said, "Hi, Anita. Did you have a good weekend?" "Well, it was okay, except I have been a bit worried about work. Just got a message to go and see Liza now. I'm not sure what she wants, but she bawled me out on Friday for killing most of my test rats. She reckoned I contaminated the feed bottle with sterilizer, but I'm positive I put the bottles on a full sterilized, rinse, and heat dry cycle. I'm sure it was the GM soya that killed them, but Liza would not hear of it." "Well, don't worry about it. This is probably nothing to do with last week," said Peggy reassuringly. "Why don't we go out for lunch afterwards and we will have a chance to talk about it properly?" "Sure, that would be great," said Anita. "See you later." She knocked on Liza's door and got a curt, "Come in." Liza looked up as she entered and pointed impatiently to a chair opposite her desk. "Look, I won't beat around the bush. We have been reviewing your work files subsequent to the damage you caused last week to the test stock, and we are suspending you with immediate effect." "What?" began Anita. "Go to your desk and locker and collect your belongings. Do not speak to any colleagues. You will be accompanied by John from Site Security. We will be in touch regarding any disciplinary action and your future here." But this is so unfair. I want to see the evidence, and I want my union representative here." As Anita protested, the door opened and John entered and stood by her chair. "Miss Collins, please come with me," he said, taking her by the arm. Anita was forced to go with John to collect her belongings. One or two colleagues looked over and then looked away again when they saw that she was in the custody of Site Security. Nova Gentech did not have the best employee relationship, and no one wanted to attract any unwanted attention. As John led her out of the building with his key card, Anita looked back, wondering if she would ever return to Nova Gentech. As she drove out of the gates, she did not notice the black saloon car glide out a few seconds later. The driver stared straight ahead, his dark glasses and hat hiding his features. She didn't even notice when he stopped his car in a vacant space at the end of her road. As she was telling her husband, Bill, about the day's events, a faint bleeping sound could just be heard from the black saloon. The driver looked as if he was checking his laptop, or maybe it was his satellite and navigation system. Anyway, a female voice could be heard from the car with an occasional male query. The woman seemed to be upset about something. Bill Collins was puzzled. Anita's story of how she came to be suspended today did not make sense. He had taken the afternoon off from work at the power plant. Anita had been so upset when she called him. Are you sure that this is about you killing off a few lab rats that would probably have ended up dead at the end of the test run anyway?" he asked. Anita replied, "I told you, I did not kill them off. It was the soya feeding tests. My boss says I contaminated their feed, but I am positive that I could not have done that. You know how much experience I've doing this job, and I'm always very careful about cross-contamination. Still, it's hard to believe that Nova Gentech would just dispense with an experienced staff member over something so trivial. What did your trade union representative have to say?" "I didn't get the chance to speak to the union or anyone else for that matter. They escorted me off the premises." "Well, I suggest that that is your first thing you need to try. There must be an appeal and investigation process in place for this sort of unfair treatment. We can't really afford to live on my wage alone." He frowned worriedly. "I know. I'll get the file and ring them now." Anita replied wearily, putting her lunch plate in the sink. Anita put the phone back on the receiver, feeling a little desperate. The union representative had told her that he was not hopeful about an appeal against her dismissal. There had been a few similar cases where the company claimed that a member's work was not up to standard. It had been very hard to prove otherwise when the company seemed to have files of evidence and witnesses proving their case. The company was American and did not have a good employee relationship. The union was only barely tolerated. Apparently, the company's staff in America were not even allowed to be in a trade union. Anita decided to call her friend and colleague at work, Peggy. Oh, hi, said Peggy, sounding a little strained. I'm sorry, I can't talk now. I'm on my way out. Oh, well, can I call you back later or maybe tomorrow? I just wanted a sympathetic ear to talk about what happened today. I'm feeling really shell-shocked about it. No, I can't talk tomorrow either. Actually, we've been told about the damage you did to the stock, and we're not even allowed to discuss with you. What? But it's not true that I killed the stock. It was the feeding trials. I'm sorry, I have to hang up now. Please don't ring me again. I need this job. Peggy sounded very tense and upset. Anita felt really depressed by Peggy's rejection. They had always been such good friends in work and socially. She went back into the lounge where Bill was watching sports on the television and sipping from a can of beer. The unions say I have little chance of winning an appeal against my dismissal. There have already been similar cases that have failed. Apparently, such things are hard to disprove. That is so typical of the bloody unions. They are there when they want your money, but totally useless when you really need them. He slammed his beer can down on the table, its contents splashing up over the polished surface. I just spoke to Peggy. She says she can't talk to me about my dismissal and has told me not to ring her again. What? You were always such good friends. She is a bit of a fair weather friend, isn't she? She can't afford to lose her job. None of them can. I don't blame my colleagues, but it is still upsetting. There must be something I can do. What about that environmental group that contacted you last year looking for inside information on genetically modified feed? I bet they would be interested to know that the feed is killing off the test rats. Or maybe the newspapers would be interested, added Anita. They're always full of anti-GM articles. I suppose it will kill off any chance of getting my job back, but I think that is a foregone conclusion anyway. I will ring them both. She went upstairs for her files and found the number for the environment group. She had been far too committed to her job to talk to them last year. Now, she had nothing to lose. At least it would get the truth out about the GM feed. She would ring the papers afterwards. Back in the study, Anita picked up the phone. That's strange, she muttered to herself, pressing down the button on the receiver several times. What's happened to the phone? She said to Bill, walking into the lounge where he was still watching the game. What do you mean? I can't get a dialing signal. Can you try the one in here? Bill lifted the handset to his ear, then put it down again. No, this one's dead too. We'll have to call the phone company on the mobile phone. Must be a fault on the line again. The next day, Anita was getting ready to drop the girls off at school. James refused to be taken to school these days and always made his own way to college on the bus with his friends. The phone company still hadn't fixed the phones, and she was going to call at her parents' house on the way back to make calls. She hated spending too much time on her mobile phone. She had heard about the possible links between mobile phone use and brain tumors. Anyway, it would be nice to spend some time with her parents since she had the day off. Come on, Rachel, your hair looks lovely. But I haven't finished straightening it. This bit's all frizzy, she wailed. Out, now. You're going to be late. You don't want to get detention, do you? Joanna, have you got your homework files and your lunch? Yes, Mom. Aren't you going to work today? Have you got the day off? Can I stay home and keep you company? She asked hopefully. I'm just taking some time off, and no, you can't, said Anita firmly. Let's go. Anita waved at her girls as they went up the school path. They were getting so tall these days, almost young women now. They grew up so quickly. She was looking forward to watching them grow into adults, perhaps get married someday and have children. She wasn't really concentrating on the road, as she had driven the route to her parents' house so many times she could almost do it blindfolded. A dark saloon, which had been traveling behind her for a mile or so, suddenly overtook her at considerable speed as she negotiated the narrow lanes leading to her parents' house. Idiot! It's a 30-mile-an-hour zone, she yelled, gesticulating at the car. She was shocked when the taillights of the black car flashed and it dropped back and swerved across her path. Turning the steering wheel to avoid hitting the cars, she veered slightly towards the hedge and tree line. What was he playing at? The black car's brake lights suddenly stayed on, and Anita was forced to wrench the wheel into a full left-hand lock to avoid hitting it. Her car skidded up across the pavement and smashed head-on into a large oak tree. The man in the black car opened his door and got out, looking around. The country road was deserted. He quickly checked on Anita before returning to his car and driving off at some speed. A hiss of steam rose from the engine of Anita's car. Her head lay at a very odd angle across the headrest, and her eyes were closed. A trickle of blood ran from her forehead, and another from around her ear.